Hey, welcome to another episode of Random Rides with Ruben. This is a 2015 Kawasaki Versys 1000. This has actually been my personal bike for the last year, and today it is finding its way into a new home. So I'm actually just ran down to the 7-Eleven to fill it up with gas for the buyer, but before I let it go, wanted to give you a quick walk around, a quick review of this bike since I've had a chance to put about, 7,000 or 8,000 miles on it over the course of the last year. I'll give you my impressions of the motorcycle and also tell you kind of overall what the ownership experience has been, kind of why I chose this bike, and what I am moving on to. So the 1000cc Kawasaki Versys is obviously the big brother of the 650 Versys, which is a very well-regarded bike. I've not had a chance to own a 650 Versys, but I have ridden them and I love them, and that's actually what I was shopping for before I ended up on this 1000. I chose the 1000 because I figured, hey, a little extra power never hurts, a little bit more cargo carrying capacity, 2-up performance, and it's a good handling bike. Seating position's really nice. And once we get on the road, I'll kind of give you a comparison of the two as well, since I've had a bit of seat time on both now. This is a Kawasaki's 1043cc 4-cylinder. It puts out about 75 foot-pounds of torque at 7,500 RPM. Very linear pull throughout the power band, not peaky at all, just lots of torque off the bottom end, and it just pulls all the way through the rev range, which makes it a great application for a touring bike. It's the same engine, more or less, that is used in the Z1000 and the Ninja 1000. Just a good torquey motor. This particular bike has a few extra add-ons that you might notice. SW Motec crash bars, those ADV Monster auxiliary lights, a Madstad windshield, Oxford heated grips, a Corbin seat, Two Brothers exhaust. I will say with the slip-on this bike, it has a catalytic converter at the bottom, which really does most of the muffling. So you put a slip-on in this bike, it doesn't change the sound a whole lot, but you do get to lose a bunch of weight, and you lose the the giant can that Kawasaki puts on these bikes. And then a GV top case, which is super useful for running around. I will say when you pull all the bags in the top case off of this bike, it really leans the bike up and it looks quite a bit more sporty. In this configuration, obviously it's ready to go on a long haul tour. Let me hop on the bike here and we'll go for a ride. I've been talking too long. Let's go. So you can see when I flip the switch on, we get a little sweep of the analog tack. I love that this bike gave me an analog tack, and I reset the trip meter here too. You can control your trip meters and things with the selector switch, or you have buttons up here to do it as well. Oh, there's also a gear indicator. That's not a factory option. That's a aftermarket gear indicator there. And it basically just compares the speed of the bike to the RPM. So it shows you what gear you're in once you're moving and once you've let the clutch out. And the first thing we're going to have to do is a little U-turn here. So we'll talk about the U-turn capabilities and lane filtering. And we've got a green light. Full upright handlebars, so full lock-to-lock U-turns are a breeze on this bike. Not a problem at all. Makes it super easy. And as you can see, pretty effortless bike to ride. It's got a 6-speed transmission and a slipper clutch, so that when you downshift, it's not jerky at all. You don't really have to rev match on this bike. When you downshift and let the clutch off, it kind of lets the clutch gradually re-engage so that you're not causing a bunch of wheel hop at the back end. I still have a habit of rev matching, but that's without rev matching. Even just dumping the clutch, it's still fairly smooth. And we might be sitting in some rush hour traffic here. The Oxford heated grips are obviously aftermarket. It also has mirror extenders on this particular bike, so the mirrors are moved out, which gives me a really nice view out. I'm not just staring at my shoulders out of the mirrors. Electronic traction control, which Kawasaki calls Kawasaki traction control. There's actually 3 levels of it. So 1 through 3, 3 being the most intrusive. So if it's raining out, you feel like it's a little slippery, you can turn that on. Up to 3. 1, it's still somewhat intrusive. I mean, if you really whack the throttle on in first gear, you can see the light flick on, and you can hear it kind of alter the exhaust sound. You get some little pops through the exhaust. And then 2 is somewhere in the middle of those 2. And then you actually have a full power mode and a low power mode. So I've actually used that before. Like if I'm riding on a twisty road in torrential rain, I'll drop it into low power mode and turn up the traction control just as an extra safety measure, even though I've ridden bikes for years with no traction control whatsoever. You can also turn the traction control completely off. To do that, you have to be stopped. You can't do that while you're rolling. So bike can be running, you just have to be at a stop. This bike also has excellent wind protection. I've been incredibly impressed. Of course, a lot of that has to do with this Madstad windscreen, but it just directs the air right up over your head. I get no buffeting whatsoever. I'm sure with the stock screen, depending on how tall you are, you might get a little bit of buffeting on the helmet. Go around the roundabout here. Bike weighs about 549 pounds wet. And you wouldn't really know it when you're on it. I mean, that's not a super heavy bike, but it's obviously not as light as a sport bike. But I think these giant handlebars and the fact that it's got 17-inch wheels front and back make it very flickable. You can just throw this bike around really easily. Feels very light. It is a bit of a tall bike, so that's one thing that a lot of people might mention online. It has a 33-inch seat height. But the reason it's so high is it's kind of a pseudo adventure bike. It's got 5.9 inches of suspension travel front and rear, adjustable preload and rebound front and rear. Because it's a little bit of a taller bike, the seat height is a little taller, but I'm 6 feet tall. I have no problem sitting at a light, holding the bike up. If you're a little shorter than I am, it might be a little bit more of a challenge, but a lot of that just comes down to rider skill and comfortability. The suspension I do want to mention though. I bought this bike as a replacement for R1150 GS that I rode for several years, and I had that and a Harley and a few other bikes, and I kind of consolidated down into one bike. And the main reason I wanted to do that is just to get back on a super reliable bike that I didn't have to work on all the time, that just made it easy. And this bike has absolutely delivered on that. All I've had to do on this bike is change the oil and throw some tires on it. It has been super easy to own, always starts right up. It's Japanese reliability, so very easy bike to own and live with. Why am I getting rid of it? So, as I said, I replaced several different bikes, both a big touring Electric Glide Harley, Ultra Classic, and a GS, an older 1150 GS, and I thought I could just live with this one bike. What I found is, comfort-wise, this bike is right up there with those bikes, especially with the Corbin seat. I have the stock seat, I never tried it, I've heard it's not the best. If you put an aftermarket seat on this bike and a windshield, it is one of the most comfortable bikes I've ridden. You're just sitting in a very comfortable position, great wind protection. The seat on this bike is extremely comfortable, so I've been really happy with the comfort. The only thing this bike lacks that I wish it had is cruise control. The newer models of this bike do have cruise control, so that's obviously an advantage to getting a newer one. The new one also has a much more updated dash with a TFT display and everything. So that's something else to consider. But handling wise, it's also fantastic on the road. I mean, you can really take this thing around some corners and it feels very planted, especially once I dialed in the suspension. When I first got the bike, for some reason one of the previous owners had taken all the preload out of the forks, so it was just really spongy and diving a lot and very vague front end. I got that set back to where it should be for my weight, and it just transformed the bike. It handles so much better now that I've done that. And I can get around corners pretty quickly on this bike. I've got Dunlop Road Smart 4s on it, which is a touring tire, but it's still, pretty impressive in the twisties when it comes to, sporty riding. The other thing that people love, I mean, I'm in 5th gear at, 3,500 RPM. This bike's engine, you can be so lazy with the gear selection. I mean, I could probably be in 6th gear going 45 miles an hour and, still have plenty of power to pull myself through the turns. And it's, not really picky about it. Even all the way down to like 2,000 RPM, it's pretty easy. So why am I getting rid of the bike? I'm actually selling it and buying my old 1150 GS back. And the main reason for that is this bike, while it's a fantastically comfortable and reliable bike, there's 2 things I'm not crazy about on it. One, it's not nearly as off-road capable as the GS was. That's a given. I kind of knew that going into this bike, so I can't really discredit it too much. But the 17-inch wheels and the more sporty type of suspension that it has just kind of beat you up if you take it even down gravel roads. And it's not very confidence inspiring either. I mean, if I put knobbies on it, it would obviously improve a bit. But because it's just not great at off-road, I just haven't really enjoyed the times that I have taken it down gravel. And because it's not enjoyable, I just don't do it all that often. So I want to get back on a bike that can do the gravel and do it well. The other thing, and this is very subjective, so take it with a grain of salt, I found that the 4-cylinder engine, while I've had many others, I'm just kind of bored with it. It just does everything well. It's super smooth. This is probably one of the smoothest bikes I've ridden, but to me, it's lacking character. It just doesn't seem like it really does a whole lot for me emotionally. And because of that, I just find myself not super interested in throwing a leg over the bike and going somewhere. So, that's personal, it's subjective, everybody's different, I get that. It has gobs of power, enough power. It's not peaky, and I think that might be part of the issue. And I can demonstrate, for you here. We'll come up to the stop and you can see, what this bike can do, hopefully without upsetting anybody. But if I push this select button, you'll see the power mode start flashing. So I have full and low, just F and L. Push select again, and that moves over to the traction control. So it's in 1, which it automatically starts at 1 every time you start the bike. 2, 3. Actually, it might start in whatever traction control mode you're in when you start the bike, rather. If you've got it switched off, it'll turn traction control back on when you start the bike, is the point I was trying to make. So with traction control off, if we go full throttle on this bike, I mean, it wheelies and it goes. So there's 80 miles an hour. So it's got power, but it's very linear. There's no peakiness to the power. It just kind of pulls the whole way up. I find myself running into the red line pretty often as well. It's marked at 10,000 RPM. I think it might be just 100 RPM or 200 below that. And because it just pulls so linearly and it keeps pulling right into the red line, I'll often, hit the red line with it by accident, just because it just kind of sneaks up on you. It's a little bit of a low red line for a 4-cylinder. Go down a little roller coaster road back here. But yeah, I don't know what it is. My Harley made way less power, obviously, but because it had that character of the big lumpy V-twin, and it was just as comfortable as this bike, maybe arguably a little bit more comfortable, I just found myself more drawn to just going out for a ride and cruising on it. Whereas this one, it was fun and great to load it up for an adventure and go on a camping trip, do some touring. It was great, very capable, very comfortable, but I just found it a little bit lackluster overall. Now, interestingly, the 650 Versys, which I said we'd talk about a little bit, I found extremely fun to ride. And I think it had more to do with, obviously it's a little bit of a lighter bike, it's a little bit more playful, And the parallel twin I found to be just a little bit more of a fun and engaging motor, even though, you know, some people, you'll read the exact opposite experience. They think that Kawasaki parallel twin is just super boring. But in hindsight, I honestly kind of wish I had gone with the 650 just to have that experience, because that's the original bike I was looking for, and I just kind of wonder if maybe my overall experience would have been slightly different if I'd gone with the 650. Who knows? That being said, it's been a fantastic bike for the last year of riding. I've really enjoyed my time on it. You know, put 7,000 or 8,000 miles on it, so plenty of enjoyment out of it, and it is now ready to go on to the next owner, and I'm sure that they'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it as well. Just in a second here, I will hop back off the bike, and that way you can get one final look at it and maybe get to hear it. So we'll just pull into the shade here. Or, yeah, how about over here? It is a little bit warm here in the Carolinas today. All right, so that is the Kawasaki Versys 1000. And you can hear with that Two Brothers exhaust, it's still pretty quiet. Not a very loud exhaust. You do have the option of getting a full header and removing the cat completely, which makes it obviously quite a bit louder. But that's how it sounds. Dual brake discs up front, 310 millimeter discs on the front, and I think a 250 millimeter on the rear. It's got this, I do like the styling of it. It's dual headlight, and it's got this little chin spoiler on it that gives you a little bit of aggressive styling and some downforce. Oil changes are super easy because your filter is right down there in the front, so you just pull that little side piece of plastic off, you know, undo the drain plug and change your oil. Very easy. Obviously it is a chain drive, so with going back to a GS, I'll be back on a drive shaft bike. But yeah, this is the Kawasaki Versys 1000. Hope you've enjoyed the review here. And if you have any questions about the bike, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll be available for your questions and try to answer them as best as I can. Hope you guys are good, and we will see you on the next one.